When Russia went into war with Ukraine, the Western leaders was quick to respond to the situation, sending arms and supplies to Ukraine while bringing down heavy sanctions upon Russia in an attempt to end this conflict. Only time can tell if these attempts really helped to bring down the escalation or fueled it. While they acted on their own, they expected fellow nations to follow their footsteps as well. India historically followed the non aligned stance and hence abstained from both the Security Council and General Assembly votes to condemn Russia.
Mr. President, India abstained on the resolution since what we require now is to focus on cessation of hostilities and on urgent humanitarian assistance. The draft resolution did not fully reflect our expected focus on these challenges. I thank you, Mr. President.
And guess what? The West frowned upon India's abstention. Students in the Oxford Union commented that they were deeply shocked to learn a close ally of the US did not condemn the Russian Federation.
What scares me is the fact that there were 3 abstentions. And whilst China's is probably a positive sign in the sense that at least they didn't vote against, what scares me is that why did India and the United Arab Emirates abstain? That shows a dangerous apathy on the part of many leaders around the world. This is not an issue we can be apathetic about. This is not something we can leave for the next few weeks. India and the UAE have no real reason to vote essentially in favour of Russia. They have no gas dependency like Germany do. They have no massive trade links with Russia. There was no need for them to not vote in favour. The fact that they abstained is a significant concern on my part.
Mr. Jaishankar, India's External Affairs Minister, faces question if the policy of upholding territorial integrity is different in the Indo-Pacific and Europe. Let's look how quickly the Western nations have reacted to the territorial conflicts in the other parts of the world. They did not react to 2020 Chinese aggression in Galwan, keeps quiet on Israel-Palestine border disputes. When India fought war on its boundaries and tried to uphold the integrity of Bengali nationalism, in 1971 Bangladesh Liberation War, the US heavily sanctions India, supplies arms to Pakistan, a country which it now considers one of the terror funding nations of the world. And not just that, US and UK warships were patrolling the Indian Ocean in an attempt to threaten Indian interests at the time. It was the Soviet Union which sends counter warships to prevent any escalation in the Indian Ocean and vetoes thrice on UN Security Council in favor of India's interest. When India tested its own nuclear heads, it was criticized heavily by the West, while Russia backed it in the United Nations, citing peaceful uses. Till date, when India asks for nuclear submarines, it only gets a negative vote in the US Congress, while Australia, another member of the Quad nation, has already received it. And not just on the geopolitical front, even to the refugee crisis, there's extreme bias with respect to Ukrainian conflict, and that on the Middle East or African sides. The West calls out they are not normal refugees, as they are blue-eyed, blonde-haired, educated middle-class civilians, not that you expect in Syria and Afghanistan.
Like Iraq or Afghanistan that has seen conflict raging for decades. This is a relatively civilized, relatively European, I have to choose.
Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, being underdeveloped third world economies, deserve to be bombed and raided. What has happened to Ukrainians should deserve sympathy, and how Europe is welcoming its refugees needs no mention. But why the selective response? When it was with Syria, European nations had shut their borders, treated almost like a cattle class. Did the West condemn things so quickly then? Or does the Middle East does not qualify for a humanitarian crisis? The situation of India is not same as that of the Western Front. Situation in Europe is not analogous to that of the Indo-Pacific. US is a rival of China, while Russia is a friend of it. While tackling the Chinese aggression, can it really choose sides and abandon the others? Not to surprise, the G7 summit this year first thought of abandoning India at the first go. There are multiple theories trying to explain the same, but the most remarkable of which is keeping the Chinese take at control in South Asia. As they popularly say, an enemy's enemy is a friend. Same is India to US. India relies heavily on Russia for arms and oil import. Not just crude oil, but sunflower oil, which impacts every Indian household due to this war. Nonetheless, US is a strategic partner, a trade ally with over $150 billion trade relations. What the Western media lacks today is understanding the fact that neutrality is not equivalent to being non-aligned. Diplomacy is not a straight equation of 2 plus 2 everywhere in the world. What do you feel on the selective response? Do you support India's stance? Let us know your opinion in the comment section. Subscribe and hit the bell icon if you want to get such contents on India's foreign affairs.